Picture this. It's June 18th, 1576. You're standing right in the middle of the rugged, sun-baked Ara Valley Hills. The air is thick with tension, and you can practically feel the beating of war drums vibrating in the ground. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack one of history's most epic, edge-of-your-seat stands, the Battle of Haldighati. And you know, this wasn't just a clash of swords. It's a monumental collision between a rapidly expanding, massive empire and an entirely unyielding spirit of independence. So let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this because the sheer scale here is wild. On one side, we have the Mewar army. They're led by Maharana Pratap, and they're fielding a fiercely dedicated but incredibly small force. We're talking about 3,000 Rajput cavalrymen and maybe 400 Bhil archers. That's it. Now, on the other side, the Mughal Empire's forces, commanded by Raja Man Singh. They boast over 10,000 soldiers, fully equipped with heavy artillery, guns, and armored war elephants. The numerical disparity is just massive. It really sets the stage for a dramatic, incredibly high-stakes clash where survival for the smaller force seems, frankly, almost impossible.
But to understand how things got to this absolute boiling point, we've got to look back at the timeline. The Mughal Empire was actually founded by Babur back in 1526, and by 1556, a young Akbar was crowned emperor. Akbar was ambitious. He launched this aggressive expansionist policy, bringing a ton of regional states under his umbrella, sometimes through diplomacy, sometimes through sheer force. This whole campaign culminated in 1567 with the completely devastating siege of Chittorgarh. The massive Mughal army breached what was thought to be an impenetrable fort after a long, brutal siege. It was a crushing blow that forced Muir's ruling family to abandon their ancestral home entirely and take shelter deep in the hills of Gogunda.
Section 1. Rise of Maharana Pratap and the Ultimatum. So, following the death of his father, this displaced kingdom of Mewar desperately needed a strong leader. Defying some pretty controversial succession plans, the people rallied and proudly crowned Pratap as their new Maharana.
And Pratap? Well, he was a physically imposing figure. He stood an astonishing 7 feet 5 inches tall and weighed over 110 kilograms. I mean, an absolute giant of a man. But when he actually took the throne, the treasury was completely empty and morale was just incredibly low. So he made this fierce, uncompromising vow. He said, "Until Mewar is fully free, I will not live in palaces, sleep on a bed, or eat from gold and silver plates." This intense oath spread like wildfire. It completely fired up his followers. He was no longer just a king. He literally became the living embodiment of their resistance.
Now, Emperor Akbar didn't actually want a war right out of the gate. He was strategic, and he knew Pratap wouldn't surrender easily. So Akbar tried diplomacy first. He sent 4 separate envoys to try and convince Pratap to just accept Mughal sovereignty. We're talking Jalal Khan, Raja Man Singh, Bhagwant Das, and finally Raja Todar Mal. One by one they arrived in Mewar, and one by one Pratap flatly rejected them. He stood his ground, maintaining that Mewar would only ever bow to their deity, not to a human emperor.
But the absolute breaking point, that came during the second diplomatic mission, which was led by Raja Man Singh. A grand banquet was arranged by a lake, but Pratap didn't even show up. He sent his son instead. And when Man Singh pressed for a reason, the hard truth came out. Pratap refused to dine with him. Why? Well, because Man Singh's family had married into the Mughal lineage. To Pratap, this was an unacceptable alliance with an invader. Man Singh, feeling deeply, deeply insulted by this, just stormed off without taking a single bite of food, promising that their next meeting would absolutely be on the battlefield. This enraged Akbar and for sure officially triggered the war.
Section 2. The Battle of Haldighati, June 18, 1576. Now, what's really interesting about this is why Pratap chose this specific spot. The battle takes its name from the yellow, turmeric-colored soil of this very narrow mountain pass. It was a geographic bottleneck, brilliantly selected by Pratap to neutralize the larger army.
By forcing the Mughals into this tight bottleneck, Pratap brilliantly stripped away their massive numerical advantage. Before the sun even fully rose, the battle just exploded. The Mughal vanguard advanced into the pass, but Mewar's army was waiting for them. Led by Hakim Khan Sur, the Rajput cavalry launched this lightning-fast shock-and-awe ambush. And this rapid strike was so ferocious, it completely shattered the Mughal front line. It literally sent their soldiers scrambling backwards into their own ranks in utter, complete chaos.
As the battle spilled out into the open plains, things got incredibly brutal. And a big part of that was the introduction of armored elephants. You have to remember, it wasn't just humans fighting out there. The animals fought just as fiercely.
Mewar's war elephant Luna clashed head-on with the Mughal elephant, Gajamukta. Luna severely injured Gajamukta, who was actually on the verge of fleeing. But, tragically, right at that moment, Luna's rider was struck by a bullet, taking the victorious elephant completely out of the fight.
Then came Mewar's absolute giant, the legendary elephant Ram Prasad, who was just causing massive destruction in the Mughal ranks. Eventually, though, Mughal archers managed to kill his rider and capture him. This was considered a huge prize, and Ram Prasad was gifted directly to Akbar, who even renamed him. But here is a truly poignant detail. Out of sheer loyalty to his master, the mighty Ram Prasad flat out refused to eat or drink the enemy's food. Tragically, this fiercely loyal beast starved to death after 18 days in captivity. Meanwhile, back on the battlefield, seeing his commanders falling around him, Pratap's fury just peaked. He spotted the Mughal commander, Raja Man Singh, sitting atop his elephant. Pratap spurred his famous horse, Chetak, into a dead sprint. And in what is honestly a truly cinematic moment, Chetak leaped up, planting his front hooves directly onto the elephant's face. Pratap hurled his spear with all his might. It narrowly missed Man Singh, killing the elephant driver instead. But as Chetak dropped back down, a sword that was actually attached to the elephant's trunk severely slashed the horse's leg.
Now, despite all these heroics, the Mewar army was pushing the Mughals to the absolute brink. Fleeing Mughal soldiers were losing hope in the scorching summer heat. But then, a Mughal officer named Mitar Khan pulled off a brilliant tactical lie. He began beating the war drums frantically and shouting that Emperor Akbar himself had just arrived with massive reinforcements. It was completely false, but it worked like a charm. The fleeing Mughal soldiers rallied, their morale was instantly renewed, and they pushed back with crushing, overwhelming force.
So, the crucial question here is, how does a smaller army survive when they are completely surrounded by a suddenly revitalized, overwhelmingly larger force? The Mewar army was exhausted, Pratap was surrounded on all sides, and his horse Chetak was badly bleeding. The situation was beyond desperate, and a tactical retreat was really the only way to ensure the resistance didn't just die on that very battlefield.
To save their king, a noble named Jala Man Singh stepped right up. He forcefully took the royal umbrella and Pratap's royal insignia, effectively disguising himself as the Maharana. And this actually echoed an old family sacrifice. His ancestor had done the exact same thing to save Pratap's grandfather decades earlier. By drawing the entire Mughal army's attention squarely onto himself, Jala Man Singh sacrificed his life, fighting fiercely as a decoy, just so Pratap could escape.
Pratap, who was super reluctant to leave his men, was carried away by his profusely bleeding horse, Chetak. The Mughal cavalry was in hot pursuit. Suddenly, they encountered this wide, treacherous gorge. And, with its absolute last ounce of strength, the wounded Chetak took a massive flying leap, clearing the chasm and safely delivering Pratap to the other side. Having saved his master, Chetak collapsed and died. Pratap, a man who never bowed to emperors, wept bitterly over his loyal companion.
Section 3, Guerrilla Tactics and Victory. Let's move to this and see how it builds. Because Haldighati was absolutely not the end, it was merely a radical shift in military strategy.
Realizing he just couldn't win a pitched, open battle against the vast resources of the empire, Pratap practically vanished into the Aravalli forests. Aided deeply by the local indigenous build tribes, he launched a relentless, exhausting campaign of guerrilla warfare. They would attack Mughal supply lines, ambush outposts, and then melt right back into the hills like ghosts. The occupying Mughal army was effectively starved out and trapped, constantly terrified of an invisible enemy that seemed to strike from 100 places at once.
But, a resistance needs money. And just when the treasury was absolutely depleted, Pratap's childhood friend Bama Shah stepped in. He handed over his entire, vast personal fortune to fund Pratap's cause. This massive financial lifeline was a total game changer. It allowed Pratap to equip a brand new, formidable Mewar army, transforming him overnight from a hunted rebel back into a highly aggressive military leader.
Which brings us to 1582, 6 years after Haldighati, to the Battle of Dwar. 36,000. That is the staggering number of Mughal soldiers who surrendered to Pratap after a massive, lightning-fast counteroffensive. It was a monumental tactical comeback. In a single day, he dismantled dozens of Mughal outposts, reclaiming vast, vast territories of Mewar.
And this brilliance on the battlefield, it came with some astonishing feats of physical power. During these campaigns, Pratap faced off against a fearsome Mughal commander named Balol Khan.
According to historical accounts, when they met in single combat, Pratap delivered a single, thunderous sword strike that was so incredibly powerful, it is said to have literally split Balol Khan and the armored horse he was riding clean in two. Just unbelievable strength.
Section 4. An immortal legacy. Eventually, realizing he could just never truly capture this Lion of Mewar, Akbar shifted his empire's focus elsewhere, leaving Pratap to spend his final years peacefully restoring his kingdom.
And this brilliantly illustrates the immense respect he commanded, even from his fiercest enemies. When news of Pratap's passing reached Emperor Akbar in Lahore in 1597, the emperor did not celebrate. Instead, he wept. A poet in his court, Dursa Ada, recited a poem that captured the moment perfectly, stating, "You never bowed your turban. Today the emperor's head bows, and tears fall for you." Even in death, Pratap had triumphed, simply by remaining completely unyielding.
Which brings us to our final thought for today. If ultimate victory isn't always decided on the battlefield or by the sheer size of your army, how do we actually measure the triumph of an unyielding spirit? Maharana Pratap didn't have the numbers, but he had an unshakable resolve to protect his sovereignty at all costs. His story is a powerful, enduring reminder that true legacy is often forged not by what you conquer, but by what you refuse to surrender. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning history.